So today we're talking about the basics of practice management. This is part of the Firm of the Future Thought Leadership, and for specifically this is for the May webinar series. I'm from Karbon. We'll get a little bit into that in a second. Let's go ahead and move the slides here. This month we're starting out with the basics of practice management. That's today's webinar, and then you're going to find articles up on the Firm of the Future site probably towards the end of May and then early June around developing standardized processes, capacity planning, never missing a deadline, so managing the work, and then a how-to guide for checklists and tasks. So always check firmofthefuture.com to learn more and to see those particular topics go into a lot more detail. We will be covering some of that here today in today's talk. Before we get started, just a few tips, a few things to let you know about. One is if you're new to GoToWebinar, you can expand and collapse that panel there with that big orange button. I would suggest closing applications like Skype and other ones because they're going to slow the connection down. I'll probably start sounding like a robot. I'm going to take questions throughout the webinar. Actually, I've got Andy who's running in the background answering questions there in the questions window, but I'll also try to grab those as we go, if not at the end of the webinar as well. This is for CPE. I will have a CPE keyword placed somewhere during the presentation today, and then we'll have that at the end for you to be able to use a polling question to answer. So with that, let's keep going. Who is on the other side of the line here? My name is Ian Vason. I'm the Vice President of Product Marketing and a co-founder here at Karbon. I used to work, or I've worked in the industry for 15 plus years. 10 of that was actually at Intuit. So I used to lead the Pro Advisor program, various products across QuickBooks. I've been in tech for 25 years plus. Just a great thing about Karbon, we're not going to be talking about it much today. We're going to be talking about practice management, but Karbon is task management for accountants. If you want to learn more, go to karbonhq.com. Here's a quick screenshot. Basically, Karbon allows you to triage your different inboxes together from across your team, be able to respond to what's most important, collaborate across the work that you collectively are doing as a practice. That all the work comes together into timelines to see what everything is and then put it in context so you can see it across the entire history. There's checklists to get the work done, plus to-dos to make sure you get it done when it needs to be done. It has contact management and then search in order to get done. Again, if you're interested, check it out at karbonhq.com. So today we're going to be talking about the basics of practice management. And we're going to be going through this plan for today. We're going to go through all the different pieces that would make up what practice management is. And I'm specifically going to be diving down into 3 of those because they're some of the most interesting or most sought after topics that we get. We've been on the road meeting with probably almost 500 accountancies thus far, and those particular topics hit the top of the barriers that people face. So I want to dive into those today to give you some good ways to think about it and also some action plans on top of it. But we will be covering briefly all the various topics. And so the first thing, again, I want to go over in terms of an overview and a little bit of theory around practice and practice fundamentals so that we're all on the same page as we go through the underlying bits that I just talked about. So I want to bring up one slide. It's a little bit meaty, but again, it helps frame everything and understanding what are all the different components that you can have within your infrastructure in terms of being able to support clients in order to get work done. And it all comes together in terms of a singular goal in order to meet our clients and our clients' needs. And that can run across 7 different primary client service types, all the way from IT services to accounting and advisory down to audit. Again, the requirement to understanding accounting goes from top to bottom, in terms of distinctions and accreditations and the like. So there's a lot of products that sit there. Again, for example, QBO, IOP, so QuickBooks Online, Intuit Online Payroll, Intuit Tax Online, products you know and probably are using. However, traditionally, a lot of different pieces were put together in the definition of practice management. And these are the topics we're going to talk about today. And they're for the firm to be able to enable itself in order to get the client services done. And so these are the traditional topics, and these are the ones that we're going to discuss. The thing that's new is those middle pieces, the connective tissue that brings together the client apps and ultimately the practice management. And this is what's changed over the last 5 or so years. And that's the communication that has to happen with clients and within the firm to collaborate and be able to see and get the work done. So there's a bit of a shift that's happened over time, and that's what we're seeing now with the technologies that we have available. And that's really come, and when we talk about practice management as a whole, the ability to, unlike previously where it could only be contained in a private ecosystem, it really goes down to an opportunity to best of breed and choosing which pieces of practice management that you need. And that's why today we're going to talk through those various different 7 groups, because you may not need all of them, you may only need a section of them. And so it's identifying which ones are going to be really important for you to be able to pick and choose so that you can be as efficient as you can with your firm and ultimately deliver the best services to your clients. And so with that, I just want to fire off a quick polling question, everybody, and just get a sense of who uses practice management today. Are you using something? Is it a private ecosystem? Is it a best of breed solution? Do you not have anything? Are you not even sure? Just helps to get a good sense so that way as we go through the topic itself, you know kind of what level to bring it at. And again, this is not for CPE, this is just for us to know collectively as a group, so I'm not going to spend too much time. Again, for CPE, there will be a slide later on that will be a keyword that you're going to need in order to do the CPE. So I'm going to go ahead and close that, and we'll share it real quick. Again, most of you are not using anything today, unsure, and then some of you, yes, have a fully fledged private ecosystem product. So let's go ahead and hide that. So we're going to go and we're going to talk about the first piece of, and one of the ones that again is pretty critical whether or not you're trying to go around practice management or in terms of being able to just function as a business in order to know who you're dealing with and know who your clients. And that's really around CRM, so customer relationship management, and then obviously going to contracting and billing and the like. And so you should be relatively familiar, but we'll go through a few points here, and I'll give you, throughout the talk today, I'll give you some examples of some products that you can look at or that are interesting, that might be good fits that we hear time and time again from those who are using them. First one really is around, the first point here is really understanding whether or not you need contact management or client or customer relationship management. There's a bit of a difference. Contact management is understanding who your clients are, understanding the individuals that work within those clients, or maybe your tax clients, which are individuals in nature, and ultimately the addresses, phone numbers, and specifics around them. Customer relationship management expands that quite a lot further. This and ultimately means you might be tracking details around the relationship. It starts off with maybe birthdays. Then it may go into notes around their behaviors. It then feeds into marketing overall. And so the CRM pie gets a lot bigger. And again, as you go down that, there's more and more sophisticated systems that you can use, and the costs are going to get higher and higher and higher. Traditionally, and most often what we see from those, again, progressive firms around the country is they're generally using contact management. Because again, it's a referral marketing-based business, you're not necessarily doing what a traditional technology company might do, which is understanding the nuances of the general audience and that is out there, but you're specific with the clients you need and understanding the relationships of that. And most contact management systems, or even just using QuickBooks Online, for instance, covers quite a bit of understanding of what you need. So just one thing here, someone mentioned my voice just stopped, so if someone can just put a question in there, it just lets me know that you can hear me, just to make sure that it's just isolated to that one person. I'll keep going. I guess it is, we're fine, so we'll keep going. First, the next one really is the systems are only as good as what you put in them. The thing to note here is when you're using any sort of tracking system in general, you need to be diligent as a complete organization to be able to fill these things out time and time again. If you're going to go to a client meeting, you need to capture the change of information when you're talking to the client. You should have their record in front of you, or at least go to the record after you've had the meeting. Because the fact that you're being diligent on that allows for all the other things that you need to have done work correctly. So we go to billing. Well, if the address has changed and we haven't updated the system that owns all the contacts, we're not going to be getting our bill to the right place. You may be wanting to do a newsletter that's later in the year to prep for tax time, to send that out in order to get people primed to maybe come to an in-person meeting. Again, if the information is not tracked there correctly. If you're trying to send somebody birthday reminders or whatnot, and again, you don't have the birthday information for most of your people, it's a failed initiative. And so it's really as good as you put the effort to make them work. Next one really is track as you go. Again, it's a slippery slope. Once you say you're going to get to it, you're not going to get to it. When you finish a call, write down your notes. Once you have a meeting, you've had a discussion, go into the system you have and fill out the details. Try to track the emails as you go. Again, all that information helps to, in one of the next pieces that we'll look a little later, in terms of understanding the timeline and the interactions, because everybody wants to know when you're dealing with them as a client that you heard them, you understand them, you remember where you're at, and you can continue on with the relationship where it was left off. Next one here is capturing details that allow for proactive contact. We talked about that. This is around birthdays, anniversaries. There's seasonality for what we do. Understanding all the touch points that you can have to ultimately open up that relationship further, to make it, to show that you care, and using different vehicles of communication. It's not always email. Again, sending a card that is handwritten does wonders for folks. Again, and that could be done, again, as soon as the project's done, or you've had a great meeting, or you've wowed the client. Again, so you need to think about all the different tools that you have so that you can move into a more proactive relationship, because that's going to open up the ability for you to charge more, for you to be able to have a richer relationship, and then drive other things like referrals and the like. This is an important one, one that we personally on our side have had experience because we looked at different options that were out there. Ensure that if you're going to go down a CRM or contact management solution and you're a full service accountancy, make sure it can handle how you are going to handle your clients. And what I mean by that is you will be interacting with individuals who are an individual tax client, a small business owner possibly, and maybe working in nonprofits. And therefore, that person may be using one email address for all of them or multiple email addresses for each one of those entities types. And you need to be able to make sure that's represented properly within your system. Because when you call that individual or have a conversation, they're under the impression that you're thinking about all facets by which you work with them. And so there's quite a bit of systems out there that can't handle that. So make sure that you look into that prior to going forward, because you're ultimately going to have Jane Doe 1, Jane Doe 2 represented in your system, and that's not going to help you move forward. There's a bunch of horizontal solutions on that, and what I mean by horizontal is they work for any business. It doesn't matter, if you're an accountant or a lawyer or a dentist. These solutions work across the board, and that's like your Salesforce is out there, Insightly, Pipedrive, Zoho. We see a lot. That's the ones that people will talk about. And again, they're going to work for all variety of industries. And what you get from that is quite a bit of functionality, but it's not necessarily tailored to what you specifically want to do. Industry-specific ones, we throw out ours. Again, a little self-serving here, but Karbon's designed in order to handle all the different nuances of accounting professionals, and that's a verticalized solution. So you can look at some vertical solutions, and that will tie in some of the workflow and tie in some of the other pieces of practice management overall. So that's what you're going to be looking at when you look at different products that help serve you in this area. So we're going to move on to the second bit of this from CRM and actually looking at contracts, proposal management, and billing. And what I've done here is instead of giving you a bunch of bullets, I'm just throwing up some of the products that you can consider out there. Again, for those of you that are using QuickBooks Online, it has billing built into it. And you should be leveraging your general ledger and ultimately to do the billing and to assist or to do the billing or track the billing when working with your clients. Again, there's other products out there, so Practice Ignition is a really good one to look at. They handle the proposal work. They will handle the back and forth on negotiating on a contract, everything from the lead to the contract to the creation of the engagement, and then from the engagement, collecting ACH information for specifically, and then doing automatic billing. And that automatic billing is tying to QuickBooks Online and so forth. And so what you can do there is put a bunch of this on autopilot. Think about how you're going to serve your clients, how you want to present it, and then use technology to help you with that collaboration and that ultimately follow up and capturing the money as it's needed. Another one out there, so Prax Ignition would be a vertical particular solution that's specific to the accounting industry professions. The CEO is actually an accountant or chartered accountant by trade. 17 Hats is a horizontal solution, and so there's folks that use it, and they're using it to help with the onboarding. They're helping with some of the other facets, but again, leveraging it for billing and ultimately the collection of payments and the like. So again, most likely for most of you, and I don't really want to spend a lot of time on the billing side because you're doing it because you have a business today, but you're really going to be starting for QuickBooks Online, and if you want to automate it further, you're going to go down one of these routes. Again, recommend looking at Prax Ignition and some of the other ones there. So now we're going to get into some of the meatier topics that I wanted to get to. So that was, again, I wanted to go through that one relatively quickly because I think a lot of folks are familiar. But we're going to talk about the second piece of the puzzle, which is really around staff and time management. This is really maximizing your throughput, tracking details for maybe billing purposes. So there's different facets of what this is overall. And what I want to do here is throw up the first thing and just get it out there talking about time tracking. And it's a good time for us to go ahead and do a poll at the same time and launch that. Just get a sense of who's using various one of these solutions out there and how many of you are doing time tracking versus actually you've thrown away the billable hour. And I don't want to get into the longer conversation that Ron Baker would in terms of ditching the billable hour. That's for another day. But for time tracking, it is what it is. It's tracking, knowing what your jobs are and tracking the time you've done, and ultimately, from a billable or non-billable, pushing it through your billing side in order to get paid. A couple of great solutions out there are T-Sheets, works phenomenally with QuickBooks Online, and another one is Harvest. And I'm going to close the poll here and show that as well. So there's quite a bit of you that are using T-Sheets, 40% of you using something other, so that's great. 35% not even using it at all, doing value pricing, and then the other question there is no. Again, a lot of people might be doing this with Excel. You'll see that from an Excel or a spreadsheet side, infinitely flexible, can work well with what you do. But again, it's understanding, and the diligence on time tracking is really the key here, and being able to have your staff be able to follow this. The interesting thing with time tracking is we see time and time again a lot of fudging of the numbers that, whether it be the employees or being the business, at the end of the day, the timesheets really aren't as accurate as they would normally be based on whole sets of different factors. And again, this is where there's been a lot of push to move towards, when moving towards value pricing, using time tracking as an estimation tool to help us with the second part of this talk that we're going to have on this, which is really around capacity planning, which I'm going to spend a little bit more time on. But again, it's really in terms of understanding what your business can hold and be able to maximize what's going through it beyond just the tracking of the time and pushing it through to the billing. And that's where, again, I want to go to this next slide, which is, I put this up there because it's timely, because it's now May and we just got out of April, so if I get a few chuckles out there, but it feels like what's happening between January and April, for instance, is basically we've got a pipeline or a set of resources, and we're ultimately taking that bag and shoving as much as we can in it and trying to get it to our destination, which is April 18th this year, but April 15th before. And there's a lot of pain and there's a lot of problems that stem from this because it's going to wipe out your staff, your quality is going to diminish, and you're ultimately going to have worse outcomes than if you had a well-tuned system and you're ultimately taking on the work that you can handle without having to overburden or overwork the system, not just the resources. And so that really goes to our next piece here, leading up to capacity planning, which is something that you should be looking at on an ongoing basis, which is to identify across your work that you do, the processes that you have, the various bottlenecks that exist in your firm. And I'm going to go through in a little bit about process management and process improvement. And the key lesson here is understanding, if I look at my work and I look at the stages that it may progress, tax is an easier one because there's generally a systematic approach of how the work's going to go between those who are doing it and those who manage it. But you may be doing an initial meeting, then it runs into capturing the documents that are necessary, then it's preparing possibly the tax return, then it's reviewing what was prepared, then it was signing, and then submitting both to the tax authorities as well as providing back to the client or the contact that you have. And so each one of those pieces along that process chain, because it is serial in nature, there is a bottleneck that's going to exist. There's going to be resources that are overloaded. There's going to be a process area that takes longer than the rest, and it is going to kill the fluidity of your work through your firm. And so I'm going to give you some tips and tricks around how to approach these. But those bottlenecks are what is going to dictate what your throughput is. So if you are like that image with the person shoving the stuff in the bag, that everything, all that work's going to pile up right there at that one person, resource, or step, and it's just going to pile and pile and pile. And ultimately, the only way to get through that is that person to work an insane amount of hours or to lower the quality that they're going to do in each product. Again, both bad outcomes. Another concept to look at, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here because we have limited time, is identifying your critical path. Again, this is a production planning concept, but it's understanding how work moves through your firm and understanding the time and duration of each step in the process, because that work doesn't necessarily always follow through the same set of resources. And so when you map out your processes and you look at them collectively together, you can start to see where certain areas and certain processes are going to be limiters or toll gates to ultimately all the work getting out the other end. Again, happy to field questions on this later. I'll give my email and we can talk about it. We're also going to have one of the articles talk about this in more detail, but your critical path is really understanding and being able to drive better output from your system or your firm overall. And so this is, we've been talking about, we're going to get into a little more detail on this, but capacity planning is really determining the production capacity you need by your organization to meet your changing demands for services. And a bunch of different products sit out there. Most people will use Excel. It's because it's infinitely flexible and you can quickly manage it. It's just a pain and a bear to continually to update it. Karbon itself does capacity planning going forward. I'll show you a bit of that. A lot of people use Trello. And the reason is there's two different styles of production planning. There's pull versus push. And I'll talk about each one of those briefly. If you want to get down to capacity planning and really looking forward and planning for what's coming and how to handle it, it really comes down to you're going to be following these particular steps. Your first is you really need to understand your current and future demand. So what clients am I working with today? What services am I offering them on an ongoing basis? And then being able to predict what clients I'm going to have tomorrow, most likely over a shorter time frame, like 3 months, which ones are going to come in, what type of services they will be absorbed. And a lot of people will predict that by looking backwards for the last 6 months or so to see what was the incoming work that was gotten as a predictor of what the future stuff would be. And so that's helping you to understand the demand overall for the processes that you have within your firm. Then you take that demand and you translate it into the capacity requirements as an aggregate across the processes you use to serve. And that helps you understand, well, if reviewing tax work is going to take us roughly, half a day for each particular project, and I've got, 100 of these to do, then I'm going to take 4 hours and times it by 100, and I'm going to need 400 hours of capacity over the set duration of, let's say, January to April. And then you can then phase it out over time. But it's a good way to see, well, okay, if I look at things in aggregate, do I then have enough capacity just in the resources that I have to satisfy each one of those pieces as a collective set? Because that's the first step of understanding whether or not there's just enough capacity in the system. Then it comes into understanding, if I spread that out over time, do I have a flat or an average sequence that comes through, or is it spiky? Is that demand going to come up and down with a lot of inconsistencies? Because that's going to ultimately create those bottlenecks. And that's where you're going to go down to the next path, which is understanding the gap between your demand and the capacity you have, and then developing the strategies about how to align that capacity to the demand. How am I going to make it so that I'm going to be able to fulfill that? Do I need to hire up seasonal staff to cover that overload? And again, the key here is to always have what's called safety factors, creating a percentage, maybe it's 10% or 15% of additional capacity to deal with fluctuations. And so, again, I'll go into this in an article that you'll see from the future, But this is really important to understand if you want to get to the optimal number of resources and be able to have predictability and be able to make sure that you make your projects on time and at quality. You really need to start looking at your capacity and the planning around it. Two ways to approach solving this is really from the push side or the pull. Here's how you do push. Push is when you are going to take new work, you're just going to shove it into the system. You've ultimately done your demand planning and your capacity planning. You've prepared for it, and then it goes in from start to finish, and you just keep pushing the work in as it comes available because you're assuming that the system is going to be able to handle it. And the keys of this are, you got to understand who's in your firm that works for you. What structure do you have? Is it a horizontally opposed firm, so you have departments that exist, or is it a vertically opposed firm, which basically has a bunch of experts that can do everything for everybody? What are the competencies of each employee? What are their proficiencies to get stuff done? Then you're going to look at those folks and you're going to look at their output. If you've got Mary, Jane, and Bob, they probably are not going to be able to do the work at the same speed. Jane may be faster than Bob, Bob may be faster than Joe. And so you then need to do a look at how fast they can do things, and that's going to dictate your throughput and ultimately dictate your capacity. Then you're going to look at your demand overall, like we talked about before, and determine what you need, who you need it, and when you're going to need it. And you're going to map that out over the time. For most of us, that's really over a 3-month window, but it could be a little further. Then you're going to look at your supply. Who do I have? When do I have them? Because, God forbid, someone's going to go on vacation. Again, I might be bringing in seasonal staff, so I'm able to up the capacity. Then you go into your gap analysis and your strategy. So how are you going to bridge that? Are you going to cross-train people? Are you going to time phase the work? So you're not going to promise somebody who's going to give you a project that you're going to deliver tomorrow when it's going to actually take a week from then. Are you going to hire up? And then you've got to put those plans in place. And you've got to do the feedback loop. And unfortunately, you just don't put a plan in place, walk away, and not look at it for 6 months. You're constantly going to be revising this based upon the changes that happen with your business. Now, the cadence of that changes depending upon the resources you have to spend. So it could be once a month, could be once every couple weeks. For a lot of us, it might be just once a quarter. I love bringing this one up here. I love, whoops, going back. I love Lucy, and I think this is a great video. So let's see if I can get it going. This is what happens with push systems. I think all of us hopefully remember this one. The stuff comes down the conveyor belt line, and again, if you've got a bottleneck, which in this case it's these two, you don't really have much options. It's just going to pile up, or you're going to shove it in your shirt and your mouth. So again, that is the negative component for a push system, which is why a lot of folks will actually use a pull system. And a pull system is using a Kanban card scenario. And what happens is you don't take in new work until a card is removed from the system when something else is complete. And this generally is when you've got situations of really variable demand versus in the push system, it's when you have very consistent demand. And so you don't deal with a lot of spikiness or so forth. But here, this is where you deal with spikiness. If you cannot take on a project unless you've got resources available, and generally it tracks the process and the process steps that you have. Once something moves from finalizing, for instance, it gets removed from the board. As something progresses across these particular segments, it moves from left to right. And the number of cards in the system is kept to a finite amount. And therefore, you're able to see the bottlenecks that are rising in real time, as well as being able to not overload the system at any given moment. How does Kanban work? Basically, you map out the processes of work passing between people. You're going to show your process stages across that x-axis, like we just saw in that image. And then your people would be across your y-axis. There's different ways of representing that. You could have your people across the x-axis and just the cards going across the x. Again, there's different ways. What you're going to then is visually show who can't do what within that, because you don't want cards dropping into places where people can't do work. And then you're going to place those projects across the processes and the people like I just showed you. And you're going to be moving them left to right as it goes through your system and your processes overall. And the great thing is if you do nothing more, you have a visual representation of your work across your firm, and you make adjustments as needed. If you see that poor Mary's got 10 projects and Joe only has 4, then you might want to use the cross-training that you've done in order to drop some work on his plate. Again, this is a way for people in the firm and yourself to be moving the work visually at every moment, so you have transparency and visibility across everything in the firm. And what it does is it helps balance things out and it not get you into a pretty big lurch where everything's piled up on somebody's desk. Now, if you want to be more advanced, I'm not going to go through here. Again, you can check the articles out, but you can calculate your throughput of your system overall. You can then look at the capacity it can handle. You look at the lead time that each step's going to take, place in a safety factor of, let's say, 10-15% for variability, and it will tell you then, there's a formula for that, you can determine how many cards of work you can actually enter into the system based upon those particular parameters. And that's great, because then you know I can only handle 15 projects. And so, you know, that's how much we can get through at any given moment. Now, again, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't accept new ones or there's a time phase element of it. It just means that active work has got a limit that you can handle. One thing to note here, give one good example and something you should all really, really consider. If nothing else on this particular section, you should be running at something like an 85% capacity for your firm. I had a talk with Ron Baker about, it was probably about 2 months ago, and he brought this up, and I think it's a fantastic point. Airlines operate underneath the notion, and they do very well at it. Now remember, in an airline, there's first class, there's business class, and there's coach. And they purposely have availability within the plane to be able to move things in real time. Because if a first-class customer, your platinum member or your million-mile guy, whatever it might be, shows up at the gate and wants to get on that plane, you don't have the flexibility to tell him to get lost. You've got to get him a seat. Because he's going to pay a premium, or she's going to pay a premium for that, and you can then have availability to be able to support that. Likewise, if you've got those extra seats available, you can bring people up from coach to business or business to first class and treat them a little bit better with that extra capacity that you have, that ultimately drives better customer service and experience, that ultimately drives them to be able to consume more for what you do. Now, what do you do with the capacity and how you do this? This is to be able to handle the scenario that you get a fantastic client that comes across that's going to pay you handsomely for the work that you do. You want to bring that client in. But if you're running at 100% or 110%, you just can't. You're not going to service them well, or you're going to be servicing someone else poorly, and that's going to reflect in your ratings and reviews that are going to be online and the word of mouth that you have, which can cripple your business overall. And so you want to maintain some amount of flexibility with your capacity and availability. What do you do with the time if you don't have someone that fills it? This is where you finally focus on your business. You focus on streamlining your processes. You focus on business planning, forward-looking activities, which will ultimately drive your throughput through the work that goes to your firm at a much higher cadence, makes you more efficient, makes your costs go down, makes it so you can service even more people. And so your capacity then is going to expand because you're actually taking the time to improve what you do internally. So it's a really, really good component and something really to take to heart, because it can really open up a lot of new doors and really improve your profitability overall. That takes us to our keyword for today, our CPE keyword for today. So if you want CPE credit, our keyword is ninja. Again, we will do a polling question at the end. Again, our CPA keyword of today is ninja. Nice little picture up there. Looks like he's floating. But again, I will give that polling question at the end if indeed you're looking for CPE credit. Okay, let's go to, lost my cursor, our next one. So this is the segue to go through standardized processes. I will tell you from the top 10 barriers that exist across firms in the US, standardized processes fit within that 3 to 4 on the top. Other ones were work-life time management, and then the other one was really talent. But standardized processes was something people really, really struggled with. So I'm going to spend 5 or so minutes right now talking about that. Give you guys a little bit of background on where I'm coming from and why you might want to take this to heart. My actual experience and background is I'm an engineer in industrial engineering and operations research. My entire earlier part of my career was building the systems that run manufacturing plants across the globe, semiconductor facilities and whatnot. So I've got a master's degree in this, and I've built many of the systems that support processes. And those processes are much more complicated, much more difficult because of all the different staging of things that has to be done. And so, you know, when I move forward in my career, I've always had that sort of mindset. So I'm going to give you the tips and tricks and the way to approach it so that you can do this on your own. The first thing really here is I'm going to give a little bit of a primer to this and being smart about how you approach your process improvement. And the first one is most people come down and they say, well, what do I start with? What do I improve? Which ones should I go after? And you really have to come with your own goal, and you don't tackle them all at once. You tackle them one at a time. And you need to be asking yourself, well, why am I really going to tackle this one? What's currently driving me to do that? And if you don't know, if you don't have your processes laid out and understand which ones at what percentage are going to give you, if you hypothesize how much benefit or gain each one will give you, you don't have any insight to that. You should just start with what bothers you. What irritates you in the morning, time and time again, about how your firm or what you do doesn't seem to work. It will be obvious to you. You know what it is. It's in the back of your mind constantly. It's gnawing at you. You just need to see which, be able to visualize that and start from there. The other way is just ask your team. I can guarantee you, if you're in a team of even just a few people or more, and you ask somebody like, man, what bothers you about what we do today? They will give it right back to you instantly. Just like if you ask them, which clients can you not stand? They will tell you instantly. And so again, the other way to look at it is what's out of place. When doing process improvement, you really have to be measuring it. You need to measure where you're at today, because you need to measure after you've done changes to it. Are you improving it? Are you making it worse? Hopefully it's not the case. And how much? Because that will indicate whether or not you want to continue to fine-tune it or leverage what you've done there and maybe double down on it and expand what you're doing. You then have to understand what you're doing today. Most folks that we talk to or I talk to on the road don't really have their processes mapped out. It's kind of tribal knowledge. It's in people's heads. Got to get that down on paper, because once you have on paper, you can have a discussion and really determine where do we want to go from here and try to create the ideal. A lot of people talk about technology, and frankly, again, I'll probably irritate a lot of the other technology vendors out there. Technology is an enabler, is not the answer. You should always look at technology second to looking at the processes, understand your direction, and then you want to see whether or not technology is really to fit and what it's going to do to ultimately bolster that or enable that thing to happen, or be able to further improve it. And then the last one really here is processes require change. And there is change management that you need to assume and bake in, because human behavior is to continue doing what you're doing before to make it really easy. So what are the steps really to do this? So this is my 10 steps to standardize processes. First, as we mentioned, determine which one you go after. Start with what bothers you, what bothers the team. Then bring a cross-functional section of the team together. This includes the people who do the work, maybe the person who manages the work, and then whoever the sponsor is or the owner of the firm. And you want to discuss openly about what that process is, putting it on paper, and understanding what are people doing today? What are the workarounds that are happening? And why do those workarounds exist? What are my frustrations with it? How does it work with clients? Again, having that open dialogue uncovers so much about where we're going to go from what we have currently. The team is going to be working on this collectively throughout the process, and they have to agree on what success looks like and what the measures of success are going to be, because they're going to need to go ahead and measure what it is today, and then they can measure what's going to be tomorrow, or what it will be. You then map that out, you document those processes, all the variants that exist from the people who do them today, and then you're going to be discussing all those variants, because that ultimately is going to give you a lot of aha moments about, well, there's a reason why somebody did it differently, because they were finding it was going to be more efficient for some reason. So what was that underlying reason? What was the root cause? Then you're going to review each and every step on the process and think about, do I need this step or not? Why does this step exist? Why do we do it this way? Could it be done a different way? And that's the reason why you have a cross-functional team in there, because you want people who actually aren't as familiar with the process to really second guess and question, well, this was tribal. We've always done it this way. Well, forget that. Is it needed? And why do you need it? Then you go and after you've looked at those efficiencies, you try to develop that new process. And the reason why you're writing this down is because this is your ability to be able to map this out. And process charts are usually, you create these swim lanes of every person you have. You look at the work, the steps are going to go from left to right, and the systems you may use are going to be across the bottom. And you're basically doing a workflow diagram that maps out how this process will be done. If you're not familiar with that, just open up a Word document, start writing step by step what it is, put it in bullets, boom. It'll probably be good enough. Then you want to test it, you want to put it in play. One of the team members that's been working on this will go ahead and try it out, see if it works, get some feedback, and then prove on that steadily going forward. Once you've got a good sense, that's what you want to do. You document it, you walk it down, you put it in a living repository for everyone to be able to reference, and then you do some further change management, which is communicating out, this is what we're going to do it, educate everyone onto it, understand the issues that they have. Again, transparency and honesty, again, is going to get you a long way because people are going to have objections, and you need to understand those objections and possibly change if necessary, or just assuage those objections. And then you're going to continue to iterate and further optimize if it makes sense. Again, most people will be doing process improvement at least every 6 months. Most people, some people are doing it ongoing, and some people do it quarterly. Tips and tricks, I put them up here. I'm going to quickly keep moving because we've got a lot of content today. But one of the things is, again, big things are for me, have a cross-functional team. If you set off to do it yourself and the rest of the firm isn't involved, if you're in a multi-person firm, you will get a lot of pushback at the end, and you might develop a great process, but if nobody uses it, it's pointless. Create a process map. Again, we document if you can, because that's going to help you going down further down the line. It's going to help new people that get hired in to quickly understand what you do and how you do it. Those docs got to be living documents. This is not something it's one and done. It's something you constantly iterate. Note that processes must have flexibility in them. You will create the best process and you will try to force everyone to follow them, but the reality is every client's slightly different. And if you're having to deal with the client, you need to make adjustments in the moment in order to satisfy their needs. And so understand that processes are meant to guide, but they're not necessarily the law. You need to provide some flexibility within reason, because you want to keep them as standard as possible, but you need to be able to have the staff be able to do what they got to do. If you don't train people on it, don't expect your process to actually be taken on, and don't underestimate that change management. So that takes us to the end of process management. So we talked about capacity planning as a high level. We've gone into processes that drive things overall. Now we're going to go into the tactics of what to do and how to do it. And that really goes into project and task management. And that's really getting work done on time versus the other stuff was trying to get work done on quality consistently. Get a nice little image. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to people's offices and just look, and the sticky notes on the computer, on the desk, just whiteboards that people can see it. But again, it's really difficult to be able to see the consumerist here in the background with a bunch of sticky notes on your computer. It's not necessarily telling you which one of these stickies is the highest priority, and trying to reread what you've written is kind of difficult. I'm not saying that writing something on Notepad is not a bad idea. It's just, again, being mindful of just putting stuff everywhere. So a couple different levels of this. At the highest of levels, it's around projects. Those get broken down into checklists, and then to-dos are the last bit of that, which is the most granular of the bits. A to-do, starting from that level, it is very simple. It is a verb with a noun and an object. You've got to have an action that you need to take. It has to be taken on something, and then it has to have the object that it's applied to. So again, that's the best to-dos are that. Short, sweet, simple, but very directive. The next section of that is a bunch of to-dos could be a checklist, but a checklist is the process by which work will get done. Again, we talked about processes in the earlier part. The checklist is your process to help guide you across the tasks that need to be done, and those tasks would be the to-dos. And so it may not be, everything might not be required. It might be things to consider. So some people do use reminders and checklists, but most of the time for us, they are things that we're going to have to tick off. And then a project, again, is it's a piece of work with a specific purpose. And unlike a checklist could be relatively quick. A project is going to take quite a bit of time, and so it's a broader checklist set underneath projects, because projects could have multiple processes that are being done. And so to look at this from a scope and a level across who might be doing things in the firm, again, for those of you that are by yourself in your own practice, you are the partner, you are the manager, you are the doer, and you know that well. But the doers are the ones who are doing the tasks. The managers are the ones that are overseeing that the checklists are being completed over time and the outcomes of the projects, and the partner is ensuring that the clients are indeed happy and the practice is moving forward collectively. So again, understanding kind of how you fit. And so how do you do to-dos? Again, I wanted to, again, just give you some takeaways today so you can think about how to best set up your to-dos that you would do. On the construction of them, we talked about the verb, noun, and object, but your verb needs to be a specific and an active verb. Call is different than, if you say contact Jane, it's very different than phone Jane. And so again, phone Jane is better than call or to contact, but it should be phone Jane Doe about XYZ at phone number blah, 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 blah. That is a to-do that provides you instant context, tells you what to do so you don't have to think about it, and allows you to take the action and complete it as quickly as possible. If you just say contact Jane, you've got to remember now, okay, what was her phone number? Why am I contacting her? What am I going to do with this? And you've just added a bunch of work. Strategy for each to-do, you want to make them as granular as possible, as small as you can within reason, because the broader the to-do is, what you'll get is a bunch of to-dos that never move, and you will start them and stop them, and it becomes very dissatisfying, but also it creates this longer and longer list that you'll never get through. You should only be having to-dos that are really about current and immediate activities that you need to have done, and it is a living list. So again, if you're thinking that you should do something and it's next week or the week after, sure, do that, but remove it out of the list that you have and reevaluate that before you do it, because you're probably going to need to, it's probably changed, and you need to make it more actionable for what you're doing today. And a to-do is not a wish list. It is a commitment. It's something you've got to get done. And so it's not you hope to get it done, it's got to be done. So don't create to-dos because you think you're going to get it done. Put that into another list or track it differently. Strategy for lists, keep them as short. Again, think about what is achievable really each and every day. You should be prioritizing at the beginning of the day and looking back to see what you accomplished at the end of the day. Tasks and to-dos, you should look at them really at a short time horizon. You should be looking at what I'm going to do today, have an idea of what you're going to do tomorrow, have maybe the task laid out for the week, and then there's next week possibly. Again, if you have that ability, and then there's later. Don't be planning out 3 weeks, 4 weeks in advance. That stuff should be left on checklists. And then the whole thing with tasks is to be able to have the satisfaction of checking them off. That's why the other things are suggested there, because that gives you the sense of progression, accomplishment, and forward moving. Otherwise, it just gnaws at you and eats at you, and you ultimately scrap doing it, and you're just becoming more and more inefficient. Okay, management over time, just reprioritize daily, reevaluate weekly, break them down. So again, when you're looking at them new ones that have come, can I break it down further? And then you've got to be ruthless. Delete them, move them, so forth. Checklists, just a quick thing on checklists. They really need to be precise, efficient, and easy to use. Generally, a checklist is 5 to 9 different things together, because that's ultimately what a process would be. If it's beyond that, then maybe you should break your checklist down into multiple checklists with more granularity. It has the same construction of a task. They should only be one line. Have a description with any checklist that has the full details. Point the details to Confluence or a living repository that's having all the detail of how that process should be done. Don't just put it in the checklist name or whatnot. Again, you want to be able to adjust your processes and influence every checklist that's in motion. Only list what's really important. On the strategy, there should be only one owner across any item. So if you've got a task or two, it's got one owner. If it's a checklist item, it's got one owner. The checklist itself, the full thing, has got one owner. The project has one owner, the client has one owner. They can be different people on each one of those horizons, but don't have two people own the same thing because it won't get done. Checklist items they will become to-dos over time. Link to your detailed process, I talked about that, and then continue to iterate. Note that a checklist due date is different than a task due date. You may put something to get done sooner than delivery, or something can't be done on the checklist on what should have been done because of unforeseen circumstances. So note that there's 2 different dates that you're working with. Staff have to be able to customize these things. If a checklist is too rigid, it will not get done. And so you need to be able to quickly add checklist items on the fly and adjust it for each individual client. Keep an archive of what you have, and again, keep them as simple as possible. So again, that's really the project and task management stuff. The next piece that's actually a new area of practice management that's come up recently is the timeline and history. And so this is providing you context in regards to all the communications, all that you're doing with a client. I'm going to give you an example of what we do in Karbon, for instance, but this is allowing you to see how all the communications are changing the work that needs to be done for clients and impacting your processes, your project and task management. And so the dialogue and the details here are really important for you to understand your relationship with any given person that you're working with, and all those communications brought together give you the context of what to do next. Again, something you should be looking for that's out there, and it allows you to save an enormous amount of time in order to know what to do next with any given person or client. Document management's the next piece. And document management's really making sure that everything's in one place, just like you want, in terms of your contact details in all one place. Most of you guys are using stuff out there. If you're doing Office 365, you've got OneDrive. If you've got Google Apps for your business, you're using Google Drive. If you're looking for some horizontal solutions out there or some specific ones, Dropbox, Box, and SmartVault. All great products. I'll tell you from what we see out there from folks, most people are gravitating towards like Box versus like Dropbox because Box has more controls, it's HIPAA compliant, it seems to be doing better with small business and accountants. SmartVault obviously is a vertical solution made just for the accounting industry. They've got a lot of permissions and controls, and so a lot of people like that because it gives them more flexibility in what they can do. And it's specific to, again, the industry itself. And so you want to be driving your documents all down into one of these particular solutions. Most people will have a client folder and then place all the documents in that client folder. There may have subfolders in that, but again, the more and more complicated you make it, the harder and harder it is for people to find what they need later. And please, 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 when you put documents into your repository, make sure you change the title. Make it so it's something that from the title, you understand what it is. Because if you don't do that, a year from now, you're not going to be able to decipher any of those documents and what they mean, and you will not be able to find what you want. So the last bit around everything is practice intelligence. And this is a newer sort of piece of the pie as well, and it's really about analyzing everything. And there's a bunch of different products out there. Spotlight Reporting, for instance, also built by an accountant, chartered accountant, has a lot of power underneath the hood and allows you to use it with your small business, but also with your own business to understand what's moving, how it's moving, and what to do next. Fathom is generally built, geared more towards small businesses. It's got a lot of animation, a lot of rich analyses that you can use. So a lot of folks use that as well. And again, it's geared to really having conversations with customers over their particular books. Panalytics, Crunch boards, those are some other ones to look at. And again, this is something that's moving in terms of the advisory services space is opening up more and more. So again, interfacing with clients. People actually spending the time look at their own books, their own details, and understanding what's moving in their own firm. And so most of these guys have the ability for you to use this on your own practice for free in coordination with using it with your clients. So go ahead and take them up on that and understand what your business is doing, how you're doing it. So that's going to take us to the wrap-up here. I understand this is a lot of content today, so I appreciate you guys being mindful of that. When we go into this, I want to fire up one more, or a couple more polls here. One was, what component of practice management is the area that you feel like is the place that you should spend your attention on, that you have the biggest gap in? Is it the CRM side of it, not knowing who you're dealing with and how you're dealing with it? Is it your processes overall? Is it your capacity planning that we talked about and the throughput of your work, project task management, or document management overall? And again, I want to keep moving this forward, so please answer as quickly as possible. I'm going to wait till we get a quorum here. So 3, 2, 1, let's close this out. And again, workflow and processes comes up as number 1, document management 2, and then again, a mixture of the things after that. So again, follows what we've seen, again, time and time again on the road. Again, anatomy of a modern firm. Hopefully this all starts to make a lot more sense now, based on what I showed you before. There's really, again, 7 different services that you can provide, and there's really, again, 8 different components, or sorry, yeah, 8 different components on the practice management side, and it's woven together with those communications that you're using to collaborate and you're using ultimately in terms of serving your clients overall. I'm going to go ahead here, and again, I've gone through some of these topics really quickly, and I get that there's some pretty big meat there. We've covered here the basics of practice management. Never fear, you're going to get more detail on, again, the processes, the capacity planning, the deadlines, and the checklists. That you guys, you can get more detail. There are going to be articles that will come up on the Firm of the Future site. Again, if you're interested in Karbon, which answers, solves some of these things, but not necessarily everything. Again, if you're going down the best of breed model, you're going to be picking up other components. Like we don't do document management, and you're going to use something else for that. But if you're interested in Karbon, here I put up a polling question. We do intros every Tuesday and Thursday. Again, you can go to karbonhq.com/events if you want to be able to learn more there. Again, I'm going to go ahead and close this poll in a second. I actually want to bring up another thing too, which is actually pretty interesting. That is actually was announced yesterday, and we're going to be I'll be on the road for this specifically. If you're interested in hearing more of my voice, so my apologies if you don't. Let me go ahead and close that. There is a Firm of the Future practice growth tour. We will be talking about accounting trends. We will be talking about value pricing, practice efficiency in sales and marketing, pulling in what we've learned from those 500 progressive accountancies across the country that we've done over the last 6 months. We've started this off only as a 5-city tour this spring. We may open it up bigger and broader in the fall. This just in terms of timing and the like. I can only be in so many places at once. I've got a crew of different people who will be speaking with myself, but we're in Philly, and Baltimore, Chicago, Atlanta, and Denver. Again, if I just saw someone say, well, no, why not California? Again, scream out, let me know if that's of interest. You can sign up there at the bottom. Again, the documents that you need or the presentation is available. It was sent out. It's in the chat area, so you can get that bit.ly URL. I'm going to go here to launch the keyword for those of you that are looking for CPE credit. Again, the keyword today was it pirate, samurai, spy, ninja, or warrior. I'll keep that up there for you guys. All this content and a lot more, you're going to see some pretty good and monstrous changes by Intuit on their Firm of the Future site here very shortly. The team is working hard to give you guys a lot of great content. This is one piece of that content. Again, I'm going to close the poll in 3, 2, 1. Go check out firmofthefuture.com. New content's coming up pretty frequently, but again, there's going to be a pretty big shift to it overall, so definitely check it out sooner rather than later. For those of you out there, again, this is my contact information. I realized there was a lot of content today. That was on purpose to really get you to open up, to think about what you want to do and how you want to approach changes to your business and how practice management as a whole fits into that, and where you start on that, not necessarily from a technology side, but understanding it from the different areas of the business and what it can provide you in terms of benefits. Feel free to email me, ian@karbonhq.com, and let me know. So let's go ahead and look at some questions here. So again, I've been answering some of these as I've gone inherently. So let me see here. Thanks for the kind words, folks. Again, we are going to send out the slides, or they have already been sent out on the chat. They were also in the email that you got on the reminder. If for some reason you didn't get that, you can email me and I'll give it to you. Again, my email is ian@karbonhq. A couple people yelling out about why we're not doing those Firm of the Future all-day trainings in certain locations. So again, appreciate that. I can take the feedback back to Intuit, and we can make some adjustments there. Going forward, hopefully we can do these things and expand it in the fall. So I think, again, we're at the end of the hour. There was no new questions that came up, and so I want to thank you from the Karbon team, from the Intuit team. Check out, again, firmofthefuture.com. Check out Karbon at karbonhq.com. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. Thank you.